First of all, I just want to explain the reason you continue to see Larimer County Sheriff's Office involved in this. The way jurisdiction works is it's based on the land area impacted by the fire. Right now we're roughly a 70-30%, with 70% impacting private areas, private lands, and that falls under the county jurisdiction, 30% United States Forest Service. We routinely partner with the U.S. Forest Service on a number of matters. Our Joint Information Center, our fire operations, all those things are joint. We use an incident command system that Bill will talk more about as we go forward and his role with that. I do have with me to my right Bill Handenberg, and he's our incident commander with the Type 1 team, and he'll be coming up and speaking in a few minutes. I also want to talk about our primary concern, which is the citizens of Larimer County. Right now, as I speak, Larimer County Sheriff Justin Smith is meeting with them and just talking about the fire and the impact to them. That remains our primary concern. A lot of people have been displaced from their homes. Evacuations have been significant on this fire. And so just want to pass on my sympathy and empathy for those folks and recognize that that is our priority. We appreciate the media working with us to get information out to those folks. Right now, our acreage is at 43,433, so a very large fire. Bill will speak more about the details of that and where we're at today. We do also have some additional pre-evacuations underway. I want to be very clear what a pre-evacuation is. That just is a notification to residents to prepare to evacuate if necessary. It doesn't mean they need to evacuate. There's nothing imminent at this time. But that area is portions of the Glacier View subdivision, which is north and west of the current fire area, north of the Poudre Canyon. We have had some spotting across the Poudre, and so there's just some initial concern about that. And again, Bill can speak more to that. But the general area is south of County Road 74E. That's the Red Feather Lakes Road, south and east of McNay Hill, and impacts the Hewlett Gulch Road area, Deer Meadows Way, Gordon Creek Lane, and connecting roads. That pre-notification went out very recently to approximately 89 phone lines that, again, may or may not correspond to actual homes. Some have multiple lines, some don't have any lines, and if an actual evacuation occurs, we make every effort to send deputies and firefighters to every door just as a redundant way to notify folks. In addition to those evacuations, or I should say pre-notifications and the evacuations we've done previously, we're actually looking at ratcheting back some of the evacuations we've done previously. We recognize it's a huge inconvenience for residents to be outside of their home and cut off from their clothing and other basic essentials. And the Red Cross is working on that. They'll speak at the end of this a little bit too, but it becomes a real hardship. So any evacuation areas that we can adjust and pull in, we'll look at doing so. I don't have any details on that yet, but we hope to have some information on that later today, maybe some areas where so people can get back in and get some access. So we are working diligently on that at this time. Other than that, I think that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Bill to talk, and we'll stick around for questions as well. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Is the volume? We okay with that? Okay. My name is Bill Handenberg. I can spell that for you if you can't see it on my shirt. Its last name is H-A-H-N-E-N-B-E-R-G. Okay, my role here is as the incident commander for the Rocky Mountain Area Type 1 team. And in that role, I work directly for the county sheriff as well as the forest supervisor for the Arapahoe-Roosevelt National Forest. As Nick mentioned, this fire is roughly 70% private lands under the jurisdiction of the county sheriff, 30% national forest under the jurisdiction of the National Forest System. So I have one delegation from those two entities for me to take the management of this fire. Now, a Type 1 incident management team, just to let you know what that's about, is a team that is trained and configured and to deal with the most complex fires. This is obviously is one of those. And we are individuals that have had significant fire experience in various facets of what we do. Across the West, most of these people have other jobs that we do throughout the year. And then we do this a lot during the summer, particularly in busy summers. So that's how we work. The team comes at 40-some people, usually with a group of trainees. and then we add to the organization as we need to, and we've added a significant amount of additional personnel to manage this fire. As of yesterday evening, the total personnel were right around 500. That is growing. It's growing substantially. And tomorrow and the next day we'll probably be up towards 700 or 800. To give you an idea of resources that we have currently are 5 heavy air tankers, that's the large retardant aircraft, 5 single engine air tankers, we tend to call those seats, 4 heavy helicopters, that's the big snorkel ships primarily, as well as the National Guard ships, 4 medium helicopters, they perform a variety of tasks, and then 4 what we call light helicopters used primarily for reconnaissance and moving folks around. We do have 2 more helicopters on order, most likely will be in today. We have about 40 engines currently and 17 crews. Crews are essentially 20 personnel that work together, trained to respond and work on fire line, as well as a variety of other tasks. We also have a variety of local fire department engines that we are ordering engines to relieve them so they can go back to their normal response activities for their constituents. We have, as of tomorrow, we expect to be at around 100 engines, or late today, and 34 crews. So we're substantially up in the number of engines and crews, and those folks are inbound as we speak. So what a Type 1 incident management team does is provides oversight for the management of those firefighters on the ground, and we support them as best we can with logistical needs, meaningful description of their missions to both ensure that they're working efficiently and effectively and that they're working safely. We have an entire safety section, a planning section, finance section, and an information section. So that's how we're structured and organized. And just to summarize, my team's goal for this fire is to bring this fire to containment as soon as we can, work with the sheriff to get a good handle on what structures were lost, and then begin the process for citizens to go back in as directed by the sheriff. We'll work directly with him on that. So once again, my goal is to lessen the impacts of this fire to this community in any way we can, and that's why we're here. So that's all I have at this time. Yeah, Red Cross.
I'm going to have Patricia Billinger with the Red Cross come up and just speak to you a little bit as well. Then we'll take questions.
It's Patricia Billinger, B as in boy, Illinger. I'm with the Red Cross. I do want to say, as we know, that this is a difficult time for everyone, and want to remind folks that whether you need shelter or not, there are a lot of resources available at the Red Cross shelter at the McKee building in Loveland. And that includes health and mental health counselors. So if you've been out of your home and your medication supply has run out, they can help you get that medication refilled. We also have people who can talk to you in a comforting environment. It's not going to be Sigmund Freud. It's nice and comfortable, good people to talk to. And then finally, if you have other needs, feel free to come to the shelter. For example, this morning we heard that our pillows weren't that comfortable. We worked with a corporate partner, Kohl's, to get more comfortable pillows. But we don't know about those needs unless you come tell us about it. So you may not need shelter, but if you come to the shelter, let us know what your needs are. And then also if you register, as we start the recovery process, that'll help us be in contact with you as we move forward to recovery.
Any questions?
You've had time to watch this fire now since yesterday when you got here. Behavior overnight, the smoke. What do you make of what is happening up there right now?
Okay. So let me give you just a little bit of a picture of what's going on, what has gone on in the fire as of yesterday and through this morning. We each night normally will fly what's called infrared photography. So we get that from an aircraft that's downloaded, and we have that displayed over Google Earth, so we have a really good picture of where the heat is adjacent to the fire line. So I can give you a pretty good idea that on the northeast corner of this fire and the southeast corner we have significant heat. Along that south flank we have significant heat. Now the good news is that most of that east flank, which is of course proximate to Fort Collins, the most proximate to Fort Collins, is generally pretty cool between that north corner and that south corner. A lot of that is run out into what we call finer fuels, agricultural meadows, a lot of good work on the part of the fire departments to take care of that portion of the fire. Most of that north flank of the fire along the Poudre Canyon has come down to the road. We're dealing with it pretty well. We have that spot across the river we're pretty concerned with. That's our priority for today, to go after that. That south flank is pretty problematic. Lots of homes, lots of heavy fuels, and we're concentrating our resources there to minimize the effects to all those residences. I will tell you that that west flank, which is primarily in the national forest and heavy fuels and wilderness, difficult access, steep terrain, is going to be with us for quite some time. That's going to be a real difficult area for our firefighters to deal with, given the conditions we have with the dry fuel and that terrain. So that one's going to be with us for a good while, and we're going to have to work really hard to determine the best way to go about taking care of that. So we gained or lost, depending on how you look at it. The fire grew 6,400 acres yesterday.
What percent containment are you at right now?
Good question. We reported 0%, but that was at about 1,800 last night. At the end of our operational period, as the sun set, we thought we were around 5%. My hope for today, estimate would be we should be around 10%, weather dependent, and all those conditions changing that will affect that. And sometimes we make almost no progress because of conditions, and other days we make a lot of progress. I think today's probably going to be an average day for the crews and engines we have on the line. So we're looking at hopefully 10% by the end of our period today.
Can you explain how there can be growth and containment at the same time?
Another good question. So that's a math problem you can take home for your children. If you take the perimeter of a fire, and the perimeter of this one I haven't measured, but it's in the neighborhood of probably, I don't know, many miles. So we gain containment maybe on 3 or 4 miles today, but another portion of the fire is growing. So I'll take that 3 or 4 miles and calculate that. That's 10% of that 40-mile perimeter, and that's how we estimate that. So it's based in part on growth. It's based in part on how much progress we make. Some days the fire grows a lot, and we may have 10% today, and it grows substantially, and we may go down to 5%. So it's a moving target.
Any update on structures, damage that destroyed?
We're working with the team to assemble, or have assembled to some extent, an assessment team that's looking at that, starting to research that. We don't have any exact numbers at this time. That information is being compiled so we can share that with the residents as soon as possible, not only a total number, but specific residents impacted, and be able to get them that information. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that, Bill. I know we're working together on that component, but that's a priority, though the number one priority is to stop the fire, protect the structures we have in place, and the absolute top is life safety. So as long as those are met, we can get in and start assessing the damage and get information out to folks. I know they're very anxious to learn more about the status of their individual residents.
Is there any line or part of the fire where you might be able to lift restriction partially?
Well, I mentioned earlier we are looking at dialing back in potentially some of the evacuation areas depending on circumstances in those specific locations. Don't have any detail on that yet, but we are assessing that because, again, we know it's a hardship for residents to be out of their home for any significant period of time.
Have we heard from any of those residents who refused to evacuate? Do we know if any of those have left the area yet, or if they're still up there?
I'm sure there are probably still some up in the area. Again, life safety to us is paramount. Property damage can be tragic as well, and I don't want to minimize that, but it's not the same thing. And so we really encourage residents who are asked to evacuate to please do so. We've actually had a few issues with some of the folks that have refused to evacuate driving around within the fire perimeter and looking at different areas and getting in the way to some extent of emergency vehicles too. So not only is it their safety, but it can hinder just the traffic going through there. It's moving all different directions, can be very quick, and they're not expecting to see citizens without emergency lights driving through there. So we're policing that very closely, and would like to ask those that are in there if they've been asked to evacuate to please cooperate and come out. If they're not willing to do that, to please remain vigilant and stay out of the way.
Bill, you mentioned you had a finance team as part of the Type 1 management team coming in. Is it too early, or what can you tell us about the cost of this? And there's got to be a calculation for how much per day, especially when you're talking about 34 crews and 100 engines coming in. Can you talk about the cost?
Our cost at the end of our operational period yesterday was $1.6 million. I can't tell you our cost per day into the future. That, you know, we'll determine that as we go. I think yesterday it was about $400,000.
And most of that money is that from air support? The cost of that?
In a large fire like this, experience tells us that air support is going to be in the neighborhood of 30 to 40%.
Speaking of air support, we haven't seen or heard, maybe we can't see it from here, but I know earlier our helicopter pilot, or photographer rather, was talking about the inversion and that was keeping some of those air tankers grounded at the airport. Is there an update on that?
Meteorologist tells us this inversion should lift about 10 o'clock. So check your watch. We'll see how good he is. Once it lifts, we intend to fly all those aircraft as much as we can. We flew them almost continuously yesterday. It was lots of moving parts in the airspace. And just to give you a picture of how that works, we have a program or a process, an individual is called Air TAC. And they maintain vigilance over the fire to coordinate all those aircraft, helicopters, heavy air tankers, and so on, and make sure those pilots are functioning safely. And they're the eye in the sky that take care of business, as well as giving information to firefighters on the ground. So that's how it works. These inversions can be a problem. Sometimes the inversion will lift in another portion of the fire, and we're going to get those aircraft up as soon as we can.
A little bit more about the weather. Do you see something in today's forecast that might help or hinder you?
The weather for this afternoon is somewhat concerning with a southwest flow. Fire winds out of the southwest, and I mentioned initially that northeast corner of the fire is a concern to us. That could be a little bit problematic, so that is concerning. We don't expect those winds to be extreme today. Steady 10 miles per hour with gusts of 18. That's pretty high, but it's not like what we saw Sunday.
So you're at 5% right now, 5% containment right now?
About 5%, yes.
5%.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thanks. Could you talk briefly to the heavy air tanker issue? I know you have just about half of the nation's entire fleet right now. Is it safe to say you're trying to utilize that while you have it, given the other dry conditions elsewhere, if another fire breaks out that doesn't need to be deployed at? And what is this? I guess I'm looking for kind of a strategy.
Okay. This question was about our use of the heavy air tankers, shortage of air tankers nationwide, and priority, and so on. I'm certain that until we get a reasonable amount of containment on this fire and significantly diminish the threat to structures, we'll be able to maintain the priority for our aircraft. Now, to a degree, as fires evolve in other areas, we may see pressure to release those earlier rather than later. We just know that's the reality. At this point in time, though, I will tell you that this is a very high priority fire, and we're not having any problems getting the resources we think we need. Hang on a second.
You nailed down the day that the lightning struck, because Wednesday was an active day, but we also had lightning up through Thursday. Do you know what day that lightning struck?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We did determine with the U.S. Forest Service investigators that lightning was the cause of the fire. With lightning, it's very difficult to say when that occurs. You know, often there can be a strike, and it can sit for a day or two before it's visible to anybody and gets reported to our office. So I can't say when exactly that particular lightning strike occurred.
Now, what about, we know we heard from a family that said they made calls on Saturday saying that they saw this fire starting and smoldering,
right,
and didn't get a response for hours.
Yeah, that's simply not correct. I'll go over the early timeline on this fire as I understand. I was involved at that point and pretty aware of what was going on. At about 6 a.m. on Saturday, our dispatch received a call from a citizen reporting smoke in the area. We dispatched one of our emergency services personnel. And keep in mind, it's not the same as driving to an address down the street on a 911 call. You're responding to a smoke report in a remote area, mountainous terrain, difficult to access. So our emergency services personnel responded. They were in the area, I think 7:15 to 7:30ish. and scouting the vicinity looking for smoke. Again, vantage points are tricky too. If you get a call, it's hard to say even which section it is, and a section is 640 acres. So they were trying to narrow that down. They did pick up on that, and by 8 o'clock we're able to order a single engine air tanker to come in to approach the scene. The air tanker was not available till after 9, but it was ordered. In that time frame, they also contacted Risk Canyon on their way up to the area, and after getting on scene, Risk Canyon Volunteer Fire District is the district that was located in. So they got involved early on as well. And our personnel did a great job responding and did the very best they could. I know from a citizen standpoint it can be confusing because you see, you don't necessarily see the boots on the ground and the personnel, or even the single engine air tanker in the air, depending on what your vantage point is, and with trees and mountains and whatnot in the area. But they were up there on scene and working pretty quickly to get a handle on it. Initial reports, I forget the exact time, but their initial reports were that it was about a 2-acre fire, and that it very, very rapidly grew to 40 to 50 acres and beyond throughout the course of the day. So we had very, very dry conditions and unpredictable shifting winds. I was on scene by I forget, but late morning by the time I got up there from a command role, but was observing some of this, and it was a very unpredictable wildfire. Grew very, very rapidly, and our personnel did the very best they could to keep up with it. I think did an excellent job with that, but conditions are tough, and it's a tough situation all the way around.
Yesterday, I think there was some mention about Stove Prairie Elementary, and that was in the fire zone, and a lot of resources were going towards trying to save that. Did you guys save that elementary school?
My understanding from the last information I have is that is generally okay from what I hear. I'm actually going to head up into that area after this and do a little scouting on my own, but my understanding is that's okay last I heard as of yesterday.
I'd like to, if I could just touch on why that fire escaped, what we call initial attack. So you have a good general picture of the conditions firefighters are facing. This conifer vegetation here has been measured at 60% live fuel moisture recently by the forest. Normally at this time of year it should be 90%. That's a significantly different situation here. So when you get that kind of vegetation dryness, all that fuel is available for fire, particularly when there's some wind moving it, as well as the terrain factors that come into play as the fire moves up canyon, uphill. So we're going to have those conditions really here in Colorado until we either get the monsoons, which sometimes we get in early July, or until fall conditions set in. So we know we're in this at least for a few weeks and possibly until fall. And those firefighters responded, I believe, very well, and these fire departments have worked really hard, and they've been a really, really beneficial and helpful to my team as we've come in.
You touched on, you mentioned there's been almost constant air traffic or continuous flights yesterday. For those of us that haven't been in a cockpit like that, I can't imagine. It's got to be very dangerous. You've got to have a very well-coordinated plan. What's it like being in that cockpit, whether it's a helicopter or a fixed wing, fighting a fire like this?
I believe that pilots are pretty brave and unusual people. If you've ever been up over a smoke column, it's really rough, it's hard to see, it's smoky. That's one reason we have air attack up, to provide guidance for them. At the same time, we've got firefighters on the ground who have what we call air-to-ground radio communications, directing where they want water or retardant. So that's a pretty good link for that pilot for that guidance. One thing we do with the heavy air tankers is we have what's called a lead plane, and those are the smaller, faster planes that can coordinate with the individuals on the ground and then lead those big air tankers so they can come in and drop that retardant safely. So aviators they're unusually good at what they do, and they're very good to have as part of our team.
Will there be any opportunities for media tours soon?
I'll address that. We've made something of a policy decision on that. We realize that this fire, as we've gotten more information, has impacted a number of homes. And so we want to get that information out to residents and give them that first without bringing in media to have them see, the world is seeing their home destroyed as they're seeing it. We want them to be aware of that and notified and have that information first. And so until we get the citizens informed, we're not going to do any media tours that would go into areas that have homes destroyed, and we're still trying to determine who those homes belong to. We may see if we can find some vantage points and that sort of thing for you. We have to look into that. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible today, given the homes and structures that are damaged, and our need to assess that and communicate directly with the residents first and foremost. So I recognize the need for information, and we do everything we can to get that out, but our number one priority is the citizens, and it can be a very traumatic situation to lose your home and to see it on television or online before somebody sits down with you and explains the situation isn't the way we want to do things here in Larimer County. So I appreciate your understanding on that. We'll do everything we can to accommodate the media. We have a good reputation as far as that goes, but need to take care of our citizens first and foremost. So we're going to have to wrap up. We could take maybe one or